Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Monday, January 20th, 2014 episode of the Monday Roundup with a voice for men and shrink for men. My name is Dean Esmay. With me, as always, is Dr. Tara Palmatier of shrinkformen.com. Say hello, Dr. T.
Hello, everyone.
And, of course, as always, the evil kitten-eating overlord of all things misogynistic and horrible and rapey, Paul Elam. Say hello, Paul.
Rightfully pleased to be here.
Oh, very good. Now, this is going to be a somewhat more free-form episode than we usually do. Usually, Dr. T, Paul, and I come up with a story apiece, and we make sure to try to cover those stories or talk about those three stories, plus if anything else happens to come up, we kind of talk about it. Today we have no specific topic, except that it is, in fact, Martin Luther King Jr. Day, which is a big deal for us. At least Martin Luther King in his life is a big deal for us. And frankly, we might as well launch right into it. Paul said he wanted to talk about racism in the men's rights movement. And all right, why don't we talk about racism in the men's rights movement? As I understand it, Paul, we are supposed to hate black men on A Voice for Men, right? Isn't that part of the rule?
I mean, being that we hate everybody, that is, I think, part of the characterization that's real important. Unfortunately, I've got to say it again, and thanks for just launching us into this in this way, Dean. I was hoping we could just ease into the subject, but no, thank you, Mr. Esmay, because there is other things to talk about here, like racism in feminism, which is a big deal.
It's solidarity is for white women.
Solidarity is for white women, yep.
Absolutely, and all the Islamophobia that they tried to conjure up in order to further more hysterics on their behalf, and Rebecca Watson doing the yo baby, yo characterization of men that try to hit on her, trying to talk ghetto in order to make it sound, I guess in her mind, more sinister. We do have all that, and I want to get into some of that today, but I was also sort of thinking back and looking at recent events on our Facebook page, and I just sort of wanted to outline some of that. I put up an image last night and a quote from Martin Luther King Jr. In observation of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and it was something that is generally well received. With a lot less enthusiasm and involvement than any of our other memes on that page. Is this racism? I don't think entirely so, but let me just go into a little bit of the history of the men's movement online as I've experienced it for the past 6 years, starting when I was back at Men's News Daily. When the crowd there, I perceived as overtly racist in many ways, that there was, anytime you mentioned even the slightest possibility of discriminatory treatment against black men, the outrage from the peanut gallery up there was just deafening. They didn't want to hear anything like that. They didn't believe that any of that stuff existed, and I'm proud to say.
I actually remember when you contacted me for when you first made contact and asked if I would contribute some of my posts to MND. I said, well, I've looked at the content and I have some concerns, and my concerns were what you were just describing, and there was also a portion of the audience there that what I would also characterize as homophobic, and we talked about that, and you told me your views on it, and I was comfortable enough to join you. And so absolutely, and I think that was probably a concern for a lot of people who are into men's rights, but there was still that stigma that it was for conservative, traditionalist, racist, homophobic, Christian knuckle draggers.
Yep, and part of that conversation, if you recall, Tara, was that it was my objective at that time to change that, I essentially wanted to run those guys out of there or to ask them to revisit their views and consider if maybe they weren't being a part of the overall problem that all men face. And of course, as we know, prejudice and bigotry affects everybody. It affects the hater, it affects the hated. It's an anathema to decent society, and it is something that I wanted to combat, because if I were just interested in discrimination against white males that were Christian, I probably would have fit in a lot better there. But I'm really proud to say that I didn't, and I'm proud to say that we did change the tone and content of Men's News Daily for the time that I was there, and that we have carried that work further into A Voice for Men. However, we still have, I think, another issue in the midst of all this that I think is very important, and it deserves a better dissection than just to call something racist. When I look at the reaction to putting the very lukewarm reaction comparatively to putting up an image of Martin Luther King on the Voice for Men Facebook page compared to the other memes that are there, what I think is going on now is not so much racism, is that our community itself is sick and tired of victim politics. And my criticism of the African American civil rights movement is really in line with that. They started out, at least as it emerged in the 1960s, with real leaders like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X, and they ended up with hucksters and con artists like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, who brought us Tawana Brawley. And so what we have is a sort of and I can't even speak for, and I'm not going to try to, for black men out there who might otherwise become involved with our community and who might otherwise find common ground in the fact that we do share many of the same problems. But I think we do have a community that's a little bit gun-shy about victim politics, and understandably so. I'm clueless as to what to actually do to change that, except to start talking about it. And I think it's an important first step in anything. But we really do have an African American community that is defined, at least in the minds of most people, although there's a lot more going on in the African American activist community than Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton. These guys are not the popes of the black community, and many, many black men and women will tell you that. But they are, in the minds of most people, representative of what the African American civil rights movement is about. And we've got Jesse Jackson running around basically extorting corporations, saying, if you give enough money to my coalition, we'll leave you alone and go pick somebody else. And we've got Jesse Jackson ready to jump on anything that appears to be racism, like Tawana Brawley, no matter how many people it destroys. And so how do we get over that bridge? I don't know, but I think the first place we start is to start talking about it.
Well, one of the things I'm going to do, Paul, is argue with you a little bit, as I want to do. You do have a very nice meme that's with Martin Luther King up there today on the Voice for Men Facebook page that's saying very well, nothing in the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity. A lot of people do have the day off and may just not have seen it, and it did get a lot of likes, so I'm going to give you a little bit of pushback there. That said, I think you may be onto something. There is a stigma that has been put on men's rights activists, some of it deserved, some of it not at all deserved, that it's all a movement about quote-unquote straight white males. And there has been a contingent that is like that. I think what you also see in the black community, which, as lily white as I am, I've spent a lot of time in, there's a reluctance there in the black community to, like, why are we going to whites for our problems? Why aren't we fixing our own problems? And I don't have a problem with that mentality at all, but it also, I think, within the black community makes it a little harder for them to say, wait a minute, a lot of these issues we're talking about and experiencing aren't really black issues, or they're not entirely black issues. I know more than one black man who's getting sick of hearing and tired of hearing about the problem of deadbeat dads within the black community, and they're starting to figure out, what's actually happening is that dad's getting kicked out of the house, not that he's a deadbeat and a loser. I actually believe that, despite all the sort of pretensions that I'm a raging lefty liberal, I don't know where that shit comes from exactly. Here in America, at least, I don't know if it's true outside of America, but within the United States, at least, you have to say that modern feminism comes out of the liberal left. The liberal left also tends to identify strongly with the civil rights movement. I don't know if they entirely deserve to or not, since there were many conservative champions back in that area, but whatever. I actually think a lot of the liberal left elite, and yes, my liberal friends, there are such things as liberal left elitists, actually are afraid of the idea that men might stop, that black men might start and white men might start seeing we actually have shared problems as men. I think that actually terrifies a lot of feminists. I think it terrifies some people in the liberal left elite who like the status quo and don't want to change. In fact, I've said this before, and I'm not the first one to say it. I actually believe that setting black men and white men against each other has been very lucrative and helpful to a lot of powerful people. And that if men start seeing that they have shared interests in common as men, regardless of their racial or religious backgrounds, you're going to see a sea change in political attitudes.
I think that you just described the biggest dilemma and why that you see so many feminists trying to characterize the men's movement as, what were they chanting in Toronto? Racist, sexist, anti-gay.
MRAs go away. Yeah.
Projection. It's not just the room in the back of a movie theater.
Well, yeah, I think it is projection, but I also think it's strategic for them to try to label us as racist in order to maintain divisions. And let's face it, I mean, regardless of your politics, I have to, in honest self-disclosure, I'm right of center, conservative libertarian. And I firmly believe that the most divisive politics we have come from the left. That people may want to argue that, but that's my belief. Well, you can argue it if you want, but
another day.
Yeah, another day. Or you can argue it today if you want to. I don't care. I'll tell you why you're wrong when you're done. But the divisions between us are about class divisions, race divisions, sex divisions. And the language of all those divisions comes from the left. That's where we get our lexicon about it. So I think it's pretty well ingrained in them, and they make their bread and butter off of the divisions. That's how people like Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton operate. They make money off of the division, and that is how feminists operate. They make money off the division. And I think what you just articulated there, Dean, is that if we ever manage to drop enough of these walls, knock down enough of these walls between the community of white and black in this culture, and find our common problems, especially between men, that is probably one of the most serious threats to gender feminism that could possibly ever occur, because it would absolutely erase their advantage, their perceived advantage by being perceived as the ones that are for the underdogs and the oppressed. The idea of white men and black men working together would just kill these people, and unfortunately, for feminists, it would also get a lot done.
If you want to see them have a real meltdown, include gay men in that, and that they will lose the market on their victim narrative.
And outside the United States, the strong identification, and Canada, outside of the United States and Canada, identification of the gay movement and the feminist movement as like being married, if you will, like they automatically go together. That's kind of foreign from what I've talked to some Europeans and people in places, Australia and stuff like that. It's like, when did feminism and gay go together? They're completely separate in their minds. Yet here in North America, it's like they're supposed to be the same thing.
Until feminist interests don't line up with gay men's interests, and then they get thrown under the bus pretty quickly.
Well, and what's interesting, when you look at some quotes, I'm going to bring up two quotes, two of my favorite quotes, one from Martin Luther King and one from his sometimes nemesis, sometimes ally, Malcolm X. There's a couple of great quotes which men's rights activists could use today, and they'd probably scream, that's racist or that's sexist. Here's one. When we let freedom ring, when we let it ring from every village and every hamlet, from every state and every city, we will be able to speed up that day when all of God's children, black men and white men, Christians, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at last. How dare he say black men and white men? And one of my favorite, I've used this Malcolm X quote a number of times. He says, we declare our right on this earth to be a human being, to be respected as a human. We declare our right on this earth to be a man, to be a human being, to be respected as a human being, to be given the rights of a human being in this society, on this earth, in this day, which we intend to bring into existence by any means necessary. And if we said that in the men's rights movement, someone would read that different, but I don't think it has to read different at all. Do you?
Well, I stopped short of supporting an expression like by any means necessary. I'll take that a long way. I think we can go to a lot of means. But there's a lot of nutcases in the world, and I hate to put that kind of mentality in their hands or that kind of license.
Yeah, like I don't want to advocate that husbands should be able to kill their wives if they decide that she's being abusive in her sleep. Unlike, I don't know, feminist Elizabeth Sheehy. I don't think that's by any means necessary that I would ever advocate for or align myself with.
Well, the important qualifying word in that sentence, because Malcolm never hurt anybody, Malcolm never shot anybody, was the words necessary.
Yep.
That's
a philosophical and a semantic debate. I want to go back a second to what Tara was talking about, and I think we have still some of the same problems. So Voice for Men has done really well in terms of outreach to the gay community and getting the involvement of gay and bisexual men in what we do and in the voice that's expressed there. We have, however, the same issue that, and I wrote about this years ago, that there's a problem in the gay rights movement of victim politics, of adopting the same sort of mentality that you see in Jesse Jackson's and in Al Sharpton's, and unfortunately, it's what works. If you're anybody other than a white male, playing the victim is an effective strategy for making progress politically. But that is the wall that still remains, I think, between us and the gay community. I don't think there's a lot, at least I don't see it in A Voice for Men, in terms of homophobia. We get every once in a while a commenter comes in to really express how he must assert his opinion that being gay is morally wrong and needs to be fixed. Those guys are outliers. The mainstream of our community doesn't give a damn what your sexuality is. It could care less. The idea is, are you interested in the issues being faced by men and boys? And that includes all men and boys. So I think we've made outreach there, and I expect to see that improve. But we still have the same obstacles that we do with some other communities in terms of long program divisions between us and them by a lot of ideologues on what I would call the left side of the fence. Now, Dean, you can tell me why I'm wrong, or Tara can tell me why I'm wrong. I don't care.
Well, you're not entirely, no, I don't know. It depends on how you qualify the statement, because there's some divisive motherfuckers over on the right. I used to consider myself right-wing for a number of the years. Now I consider myself a pragmatist, which makes me very much hated on both right and left, and certain types of libertarians really hate pragmatists, because it's like, you got to be on principle first, and I'm like, I'm on what works first. Then we'll talk about, morality matters and principles matter, but at the end of the day, if you can't get shit done, what good did it do you? No, I see some really divisive motherfuckers over on the right, and really stupid people over on the right, as well as on the left. That's why when I hear somebody say the word liberal elitist, I'm like, yep, I know those people. And when they say brain dead conservative ideologue, I'm like, yep, I know those people too. I guess on the subject of so-called victim politics, where do you draw the line? Because I get exactly what you're saying. If you're male especially, and maybe if you're white and male, I don't know, you get used to being blamed for things you had nothing to do with. But once you're the scapegoat, it's hard to not feel like you're being scapegoated for things you don't have any control over. And that's where I guess some white discomfort comes from. But when you actually are the victim of racism, when you actually are the victim of sexism, when you actually are the victim of misandry, when you actually are the victim of a justice system that is out to get you, or a family court system that is out to get you, or an education system that treats you as a second-class citizen, how can you identify those things and then simultaneously say, but I'm not practicing victim politics? To me, the term victim politics is almost like, I don't know what this means. If you're taking something bad that's happened to you and making it central to your identity, that's a sickness, I think, right? In terms of the black-white thing, I remember I saw this movie called What Black Men Think by Jenks Morton, which I recommend very highly. And he was interviewing a guy who said, hey, you know what? If you put, I fight race, if you get a business card that said, I fight racism for a living, then in America, you'll never run out of having a job. You'll have a job for life. If your job is fighting racism, you'll never be out of a job. But are you actually accomplishing anything? That's a different question. So is racism real? Yes. The question is, what do you do about it? And that to me struck me as a very pragmatic attitude. I know misandry is real. I've experienced it. I've seen it. So am I practicing victim politics?
I don't think so. I think you made the really important qualifier. If you don't make the victimization the core of your identity, and if you leave the onus back on the individual for what happens in their lives and what they do about it and where they take it from there, instead of turning it into a call for the rest of society to bend to what you want and to treat you like a special snowflake because of what you've been through, then I don't think that is victim politics. I think there's identifying problems. For instance, if I look at what the war on drugs has done and what I believe that feminism is now doing in the African American community, and we'll use the war on drugs for the best example. The war on drugs is a war on minority communities and on very poor whites. It is a war on people that can't defend themselves legally, that don't have the resources for attorneys. It's a war in neighborhoods where the police can run around and kick in doors at a whim without ever worrying about consequences, and that happens to play out a lot in our
or drives up with a tank and shoots an unarmed man in the foyer of his own home.
Right, exactly. And this is what we're talking about here. This stuff is real. Racial profiling is real. People driving while black in the wrong neighborhood, getting harassed by police is real. If we deny this, then we just might as well go to bed with the feminists. If we can just look at the reality of what's going on in the world and pretend like it's not happening, well, to me, that's pretty foolish. And we're seeing the same thing now. I have no problem believing at all that policies like VAWA, where mandatory arrest laws and primary aggressor laws have a disproportionate effect in the African American and other minority communities than they do with rich white guys who can lawyer up in an instant and spend a lot of money defending themselves and aren't subject to being just pushed around the way people with no money are. But am I looking at any of these problems like we need to resort to an identity, the overall identity of victimhood, and looking for special legislation in order to validate our status as victims? No, I don't think that's the answer for men. I don't think it's the answer for anybody else either.
Now, it's kind of interesting when all you want is gender neutrality that you're accused of playing victim. I get that a lot. It's like, no.
No, having whole pages and pages of legislature specifically for your sex is is that. You know, asking for gender neutrality is actually the opposite of that.
That's right.
The ability for some folks to twist that pretzel around is just never ceases to amaze.
Well, yeah, I give that as a call out to all the boneheads I've seen on the internet that say that MRAs are doing just the same mirror thing that feminists are. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what? Are you even watching what has happened? Have we asked for a Violence Against Men's Act? Have we asked for some sort of pay balance equity law that looks at the disparities? And there are disparities that happen to men in pay in some professions. Or have we asked for legislation on that? Is anybody campaigning for that? No, that's absolute nonsense. Have we asked that monies or funding for domestic violence be somehow funneled only to men? No. Nobody's asking for any of this stuff. It's not a mirror of feminism. It's the exact opposite. We have been asking for gender neutrality, just like Tara said.
I once said that that at least a third of those who commit sexual assault of one form or another are female, and was accused of being as bad as the feminists because I said that might be true. Okay, so if I even suggest that women may be almost as bad as men, that's, I don't even make, my brain is full of fuck. I don't know how to answer that. Although, by the way, that 1 in 3 statistic may be a little too low.
You know, I did hear, just as a piece of advice, I did hear a guy say once years ago, it stuck in my mind, we can educate the ignorant. It's just better to ignore the stupid.
Well, there you go. I do meet white guys who will not let go of of white as the identity, and who sense that everybody's against them because they're white and male. And I have met black dudes who think the problems that they are having is because they're black. But something Tara just said there was very telling. Tank rolls through a black neighborhood and shoots down a black what?
That happened to a white man, I believe. The news story.
Well, you're not helping me there.
Sorry.
Okay. If a black what gets shot down in the street? A black man? Oh, you mean the black men get shot more often than black women? Yeah. And so maybe the issue isn't entirely because you're black, but it's because you're a dude. I don't know. It gets back to something I've said before. If more men black men and white, start to notice that misandry is an underlying theme quite often as much or more than race is, you can see some real
I got a good example of what you're talking about. I watched a video the other day. I don't remember if we posted it to the site or not, but it was this really huge, I mean, this guy had to be 400 pounds, 6'4", 6'5", black guy that had a woman chasing him and threw a brick at his head. And I couldn't tell if it bounced off his head or his hand because it wasn't that clear. But then she leaves her baby in a stroller
unattended.
Follow this guy down the street, beating up on him,
pulling on his shirt,
and sure enough, they grab him, and he's up against the car. And was that because he was black? The cops were, well, there was one black and one white cop. So was that because
this woman is assaulting him? This black woman is assaulting him. This black woman has abandoned this child. A block behind, goes to where she can't even see the child. Who gets arrested?
And in fact, even go back to retrieve the child. I believe some other woman wheeled the baby over to her while she was on this guy like a bloodhound, throwing rocks at him.
The point is, they did that. They went after him first because he's male. Not because he's black.
One of my best friends in the world, Dwayne, I'll give him a shout out. Dwayne had his first experience with friend of the court with his ex, and let's see, he's black. The judge was black. Every attorney in there was black, and he walked out of there, and it's like they basically told me to shut my black ass up and pay.
Well, that's what they tell white men in court too.
Yeah,
so.
they just don't add the rejoinder, right? They don't need to put a qualifier on it. It was nothing but a bunch of women in there, and they all hated his guts. We had another video that I'm going to make sure to put that one in the low bar as soon as this is over and on AVFM. We had another one we talked about last week: 2 white chicks bullying the fuck out of a black dude. Remember, we were talking about it. She's pushing on him, she's hitting him, and she's trying to get him to hit him, and they're laughing at him. Ha ha! That's assaulting a woman. I don't think they were attacking him because he was black. They figured they could pick on him because he was a guy.
Yep, no doubt, 100%.
And had in their little pea brains, if we can get him to touch us, it's assault. Meanwhile, in order for him to put his hands on them, it was after he had sustained incredible assault from them. It's just completely
multiple times.
Yep. And I thought he showed enormous restraint.
And so, okay, we've gone ahead and owned that there is some racism in the MRA. I see it. It seems like it's going away more and more to me.
Yeah,
we're really not friendly with it at all at A Voice for Men. We have no patience for it at all. I mean, our policy does say we won't boot you for that. We'll just mock you severely until you leave. But at the flip side, and this goes back to the thing, there's been an undercurrent of racism in feminism from the very beginning, and there is no denying that. In fact, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Feminism has, at least the so-called second wave from the 1960s onward, almost entirely made up of privileged white women who wanted to pretend they were as oppressed as black men were.
Yep, and it does predate that. You go back to Margaret Sanger, and the founder of Planned Parenthood, whose plan was basically genocidal. Her plan was to wipe blacks out by aborting as many babies as possible. This was not, something off on the side. That was her raison d'etre for even being involved in this work.
It wasn't the only thing. It wasn't the only thing, but yeah.
Well, it was.
Eugenics was part of her plan. It was. That
was her intention, was to exterminate the black race. She said it quite literally, and she didn't want people to know about it. But that tradition, like you said, feminism was sprung up again in the late 60s by a bunch of married white females that used their husbands' money and positions in life, and literally, had been sitting around the pool eating bonbons and decided that their oppressed lives, they needed something to do that was interesting, and that's where the type of background that Betty Friedan came from. No matter what anybody tells you, this was a culture of privileged white women that started a movement, and they were not friendly to blacks, male or female, in any sense of the word, and they have used racial prejudice all the way through. Now their most common target, Tara jokes all the time about how when you argue with a feminist, if they run out of anything else to say, because they can't counter your arguments, they'll jump up and scream Saudi Arabia. Everything's because of Saudi Arabia. Well, of course, if you go onto A Voice for Men, you can read articles. We have articles from Iran and other countries that point out that all is not the feminist narrative about these countries, that there is a lot that people don't know that favors women in those cultures.
And severely disadvantages men.
Absolutely. Wherever you have it hard on women, I guarantee you have it harder on men in every culture on this planet. There are no exceptions. But you can listen to their rhetoric, which is designed to drum up hatred of Islam and fear of Islam, and mischaracterizes even that culture. They don't hesitate to use racial bigotry in many different forms in order to further their message, and they never have.
No, they really don't. And the only argument I'd give you back is some of those second wave feminists never got married. They were just highly dependent on daddy's money, like Betty. I think Gloria Steinem never married. Daddy's money helped her there.
I think she married the CIA.
Yeah, maybe. There's another one. I can't even remember her name. She was Jewish. Oh, we're anti-Semites too. Wait a minute. But she was Jewish. I can't remember her name. I'm wanting to call her Shlomo for some reason, and that makes me sound dumb. But I remember her name. I'll get back to it. But seriously, you're talking about a movement of mostly very privileged upper middle class and upper class white women. And that they are speaking for all women.
Jennifer Siebel Newsom, who Christina Hoff Sommers did a short review of her new movies in what's the name of the movie? I've already blanked it out. The Mask You Wear, Underneath the Mask of Masculinity.
I thought it was the mask we wear. Whatever. I know what you're
Whatever. Doesn't matter. Here you have a woman who her first documentary was Misrepresentation. She's the second lady of California from a very moneyed, privileged San Francisco, well-to-do family. And I saw her speak at a presentation once, and she was whining about how she can't get acting jobs. Like, well, if your public speaking performance is any indication, it's probably because you're not that good. It's not because you're being oppressed, my dear. You have privileges that most people can't even begin to dream of.
You are looking for the name Jennifer Siebel Newsom there.
Yes, I had her name. I couldn't remember the name of her latest documentary where she's deciding what the real issues of boys and men are.
And the woman, the privileged girl who was reliant on daddy and family's money was Shulamith Firestone. That's the name I was looking for. But anyway.
Well, when you look at the video of the protest in Toronto against Warren Farrell and the outrageous conduct, what I saw was 99% young white girls, probably there on dadum's money, going to school, claiming to be oppressed and chanting about women holding up half the sky.
Whether dadums paid the money willingly or the state court ordered dadums to pay money to mommy because, hey,
that's right.
Dad's a wallet.
Right. No, yes, they had strong independent mothers who were completely dependent on the child support, the alimony, and the state or the state assistance so that they could live on. Yes, that kind of strong independent woman. Yeah.
Yes, you know the type.
This is why a lot of us were laughing at the solidarities for white women thing when it started up. I really think a lot of black women have started to figure out what do these rich white bitches have to do with anything I'm living with or living through? And the answer, I'm afraid to say, is nothing. In fact, I'll go ahead and say this. Patriarchy theory, as posited by feminists, is racist to the core. Patriarchy theory is racism. Patriarchy theory is racist. See, I'm going to keep saying it till it penetrates. Patriarchy theory is racist. You know why it's racist? Because not only did a bunch of privileged white women make up the patriarchy theory, but what it means is you black men have been oppressing your black women for thousands of years. You Asian men have been oppressing your Asian women for thousands of years.
I would argue that rape hysteria, or what some feminists like to call rape culture, is historically racist as well.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Hey, 100 years ago in this country, all a white woman had to do to get a black man lynched was to point to him and say, he raped me.
Scottsboro boys.
That's right. That's right. And who was the guy in the 60s? I'm trying to remember his name. I'm wanting to say Medgar Evers, and that's not it. But he was a black man who was accused of wolf whistling at a white woman, and he wound up getting killed over it. And our friend Alison Tiemann, she pulled a quote out of Susan Brown-Miller's book where she said, well, the thing everybody's afraid to, basically she said what everybody's afraid to admit is when that black guy wolf whistled at her, he was trying to take her as his possession.
Christ.
And that's why, yeah.
What the hell are these bitches smoking? I want some. My God.
Quantities.
No, you don't want. That's out of Susan Brown-Miller's book, her most famous book on rape. And yeah, so even though whether he raped her or not is immaterial, but because ultimately he was trying to exert his male control over a woman. And it's like, oh, fuck you. Fuck
and it's
you.
the same. It's interesting. You know, Tara for 3 weeks in a row has brought up Elizabeth Sheehy, and it's a good point to bring up because what we're talking about is the justification of lynching.
I've got a Sheehy in my bonnet.
Yes, and I don't blame you. This is the same mentality. We have people in the modern feminist movement that would have fit right in the antebellum South. They're just different group to point the finger at. But yeah,
and instead of walk a mile in her shoes, it'd be walk a mile in her corset. Same difference.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're dealing with. So when people want to make the accusation that that there's racist in the MRM, you know what? Hey, there probably are. I'm sure that you can get any large group of people, and we are getting large these days, and you're going to find some sort of social reject. I'm sure there's a few pedophiles in the MRM too, and there's a few arsonists, and there's a few murderers, and there's a few of any other kind of social misfit that you can think of. But the in feminism, the ideology itself is predicated.
But wait a minute. In feminism, they protect their pedophiles as long as the victim is a 12-year-old boy. They turn them into folk heroes.
You talk about pedophiles, Germaine Greer, Simone de Beauvoir, and Eve Ensler.
And they turn their murderesses into icons. Lorena Bobbitt cut off a penis and become a feminist legend.
That's right.
So while the MHRM may have misfits and social miscreants who at some point may commit a crime, you know what? We're not going to put them up on a poster and
say,
bow down and raise them to the level of a brave role model.
That's right.
They hero worship their criminals. It's sick.
Valerie Solanas is a hero, right?
Yep. But that was just a piece of satire.
And she didn't actually kill Andy Warhol. She only almost killed him. So it's not the same
actually,
thing.
He died years later, and it was very much related to that gunshot wound. So she did.
Was it?
He had complications for the rest of his life. Yes, he did.
Yes, and no doubt he was grievously injured. And it frequently happens that people that undergo that kind of trauma have many years shaved off their lives. I don't doubt that happened to Andy Warhol. She did kill him. She's a murderer. But of course, in Sweden now, they're running high school plays based on her work. It is absolutely, you want to find racism in gender politics and sexism and hatred and murder. Hey, man, join now.
That's right. I mean, one of the few schisms in feminism that you can point to was over a woman named Hedda Nussbaum. And it did create a schism, but the ones who thought that the murderous Hedda Nussbaum should not be excused were the ones who lost, and basically their careers as feminists were over. And the entire feminist establishment helped defend this woman and say she was there as part of a child murder with a guy named Joel Steinberg. And the feminist establishment that wanted 100% responsibility put on his shoulders and her just a victim of his abusiveness, that's the stance they wanted to take. And those who even just questioned whether they should try to make a hero out of Hedda Nussbaum were given the boot. I'm sorry, I'll say it now. Go ahead and sue me. Hedda Nussbaum, you were complicit in that child's murder if you didn't murder him yourself and then let Joel Steinberg take all the blame. Fuck you. So yeah, there is one of the differences, isn't it? We don't, when people act like assholes in our movement, we don't want anything to do with them.
No, we call them out and we cast them out.
That's right. That's right. So I don't know what further thought I had there.
Paul was taking it somewhere, but I can't remember where.
I can't remember either. It must be a good time to close up shop because I can't remember what the hell I was talking about.
Can we just quickly do a follow-up on Sarah Len or Elin or however you pronounce her last name?
Just don't pronounce it like Elam, and I'll be fine.
It's another bee in my bonnet. This is a story that Dean discussed a few weeks ago. I think maybe in December. about a woman who ran a cancer scam fraud and I think made out with over $100,000 in donations because she pretended to have some type of cancer, and has quite a prolific history of false rape and false kidnap allegation. And finally, she's going to do some time for it. She actually sent a man away, a James Grissom, to prison for over a decade based on a false rape allegation she made, I believe, in 2001 or 2002. So that poor man spent a decade in jail. She's probably going to get maybe 5 years, which is, you know, at least she's getting punished. Although, as I said to Paul in an earlier discussion, you know, I have to wonder if she would have gotten any time had she also not run the cancer scam, because people get really pissed off about that kind of thing. False rape allegations, not so much, but lie about being a cancer patient and wear that pink ribbon feloniously, and boy, you will anger a lot of people. But as I was reading one of the many news stories, one of the detectives working on the case, a Sergeant Barb, B-A-R-B, I assume that's short for Barbara, Sofin, made the statement because they were asked, you know, how could you miss the fact that she had made something like over 6 or 7 false rape allegations in her lifetime, which is statistically kind of high if you're not living, say, in Darfur or the Belgian Congo. She said, and this is a direct quote from a news article in, I think, where was it, Boston.com. The judge's statement was pretty powerful, State Police Sergeant Barb Sofin said outside the courtroom. My law enforcement side said I should have known better, but I saw her with my heart.
Holy
I read in the
mother of God!
You're not supposed to be reviewing criminal investigations with your heart. You're supposed to be using your noggin. Ah!
So in other words, what she just said was, I should have done my job, but I'm unfit and incapable of doing my job the way it's supposed to be done, and which should have been followed by I'm resigning immediately, but I'm sure it wasn't.
Well, what's also hidden in those stories is this woman made a total of 6 rape allegations in her life.
Thank you.
Finally goes to jail for 1, and isn't going to serve as much time as one guy that, you know, a jury took less than a half hour to determine she had lied about.
So in other words, you spend your whole life making false rape allegations, but you have to lie about having cancer before it'll piss somebody off.
Yeah, apparently. All right, well, you're right. We've been going for 50 minutes now, and we try to go shorter than that, so let's start wrapping this up. It is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Race is still a problem in America. I think it's fair to say that if there's a racist problem in some parts of the men's rights movement, I think it's pretty damn obvious that there's as big or bigger such a problem within feminism. Nobody wants to talk about it. We're willing to talk about it on either side. Today is Martin Luther King Jr.'s, well, it's not his birthday. It's the day we celebrate his life. He's one of my heroes, for sure. And anybody who doesn't like it can kiss my ass.
Your white ass.
Kiss my pimply white ass if you do not like the fact.
My pimply white middle-aged ass.
My pimply white neck-bearded middle-aged ass. He is one of my heroes, and he always will be. He has been since I was a child, growing up in a very racist part of Chicago in the 70s, and he's still a hero to me now. Anybody else got anything else to say?
Yeah, I got one thing. I mean, as if we don't say it all the time, because we do say it regularly at A Voice for Men. I just, on this occasion, I want to say it again. If you're sick of victim politics, I'm right there with you. I'm just as sick of it. Whether it's victim politics on behalf of African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, gay people, whatever, I'm just tired, folks. I'm tired of the victim mentality. I'm tired of the you owe me, restorations crowd, all that garbage. But if you want to deny that racism is an issue in the United States, if you want to deny even that there's a problem, that we need to be vigilant in the men's movement about our own people. And I don't mean to be talking in a McCarthyistic way, but that we all need to watch what's going on all the time, so that we do what feminists won't do, which is self-police and clean up our own act. If you think that this problem in our culture would be better served with prejudice, that you think blacks are the problem, or any of that kind of mentality, please go somewhere else other than A Voice for Men.
Perhaps
we
a
really
Rad Fem
don't
Hub?
need you there.
Perhaps a Rad Fem Hub conference.
Yes, they're into hating groups of people. I'm sure they will take you. We won't, however. And I want to acknowledge, too, that I also believe Martin Luther King is a great American hero, that he stood up for something when he probably suspected it would get him killed. And that's exactly what happened. And if we had more men in the men's movement standing up like he did for the rights of men and boys, we would have made a lot more progress than we have.
And we're going to make that progress. We
Yes,
are.
we are.
You watch. You watch. Tara, parting thoughts?
Have a good week, everyone. And I think that both of you summed everything up very well, and I'm cognizant of the fact that I tacked on an extra 5 minutes with my last bee in my bonnet, so I won't tack on anymore.
Shrinkformen.com says, meet Dr. Tarup if you're involved in an abusive or think you might be involved in an abusive relationship with a woman. Please visit shrinkformen.com. If you want to talk about any of this other stuff, you can go there, but you can also go to avoiceformen.com too. We'll see you next week.